Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda bersama saya Iza Izlan dalam agenda Awani, dan pada hari ini saya bersama dengan seorang pakar pengarah antarabangsa Pusat Kajian Keganasan Global Monash University, iaitu Profesor Greg Button, dan bercakap tentang memerangi ancaman Islamic States ataupun IS. Dan Profesor Greg Button berada di Malaysia pada ketika ini untuk memberikan satu ceramah mengenai the Islamic State Movement, Radicalization, Recruitment and the Appeal yang berlangsung pada Jumaat di Monash University. Dan izinkan saya bercakap bahasa Inggeris, menjemput Profesor Greg Button to agenda Awani. You can speak Indonesia a bit, right?
Yes, I'm not confident I'm Malaysian, even though I did study Malay literature years ago.
So I can't interview you in Bahasa Malaysia, right? Sikit-sikit?
Sikit-sikit. I can reply in Indonesian, but if it comes out strange in Malaysia, then it's...
Okay, so it's fine. I'm just pulling your leg.
Yeah.
So we're going to conduct this interview in English.
Sure.
All right, so you had a talk at Monash University about the Islamic State, the radicalization, the recruitment and the appeal. And this is really important because, as we see in Malaysia currently, the number is growing, and more people are finding that this is something that, oh, maybe I want to look into, and then they get trapped into the idealistic image that the IS has portrayed. So before we go into like how this is growing and the recruitment and all of that, we want to understand, because the Islamic State, the ISIS had succeeded in imposing itself as a very key player in the Syrian crisis, and it has grown rapidly. And to understand that the cause that they've been fighting for, the battle that they're fighting for, we should understand what a militant, the IS militant is, and who they are. So maybe you can briefly describe the people that are a part of this movement.
Sure. Okay. Islamic State, as they now call themselves, having established a caliphate, a khalifa, on June 29 last year, is a strange hybrid. In some ways, it's like Al-Qaeda 3.0. It's the third generation of Al-Qaeda ideas, even though the leadership has broken with Al-Qaeda core. They used insurgency techniques to take territory. This grew out of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which emerged in 2004 in the wake of the occupation of Iraq. It had built up a strong insurgency dominance in Iraq. It saw an opportunity with the civil war in Syria in 2011. It took over territory in the north of Syria and the west of Iraq, and of course eventually conquered Mosul and settlements along the Tigris in the center of Iraq in the middle of last year. But this has been years in the making. So conventional insurgency, now conventional military hardware. There's a lot of former Iraqi security officials who have joined, a lot of soldiers who have know-how. But of course it's also using terrorist methods, and it's also using foreign recruitment. So it has maybe 20-odd thousand foreign fighters who have joined its ranks. At the same time, it's a very calculated police state with total control over its citizens. And it's also a kind of religious cult, a kind of religious sect. I mean, it misuses religion in a very powerful way. And so it has many different faces, and the face it presents to the world that we see of violence is not the face it presents when recruiting, where it presents itself as the good guys establishing the perfect society. But we need to recognise that they're very clever at what they're doing, and they're very clever at engaging people who are asking questions and winning their trust.
Yeah, and the IS, it's not new actually, apart from the name ISIS, but it has been there since even before the Syrian crisis.
Oh yes, it's been there really since 2004. Al-Qaeda in Iraq emerged in 2004 under a Jordanian leader, Musab al-Zarqawi, a very tough guy, but he was quite charismatic, built up a very strong movement. He was killed in an airstrike in 2006, and we thought maybe that was the end of the problem, but they came back.
Stronger.
And their new leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, as he calls himself, who is a local Iraqi and a religious scholar, took over in 2010 and quietly built up a very formidable program of regeneration. He led a campaign to break out Al-Qaeda fighters from jails in Baghdad. So in the middle of 2013, he broke out many hundreds of Al-Qaeda terrorists, and he's got a sort of hardcore element of Al-Qaeda former fighters, but also many Iraqi intelligence military officials who are very clever at conducting a political machine. So they present a religious face, but behind that is a military machine. So we shouldn't underestimate this movement. 12 months ago we did underestimate and thought it wasn't going to be so serious. After the fall of Mosul, we realised, no, it's actually not going away.
And under the helm of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, are they still holding the same torch as before?
They very much are. The face they present when recruiting is that they have established the caliphate. And they say this is, I mean, it's a misuse of the word caliphate, of course, as with everything. But they say if you believe in da'wah, you believe in sharia, you have to support the caliphate. And the strong emphasis they use is this notion of hijrah, of migration to come and join the Jamaat, the community. So they keep emphasizing this again and again. You know, 10 years ago, Al-Qaeda said to people, you can't be a good Muslim without supporting jihad. This group says the same thing, but they say you can't be a good Muslim unless you're prepared to make hijrah, to leave home, come and join us and fight with us. And they portray their fight as being an end-of-the-world Armageddon fight. And they use a disreputable hadith to make that claim, referring to the city of Dabiq in northern Syria. They call it Asham, and they say there'll be this great malahim, this great fight in Asham, and that this is manifest destiny. This is what God plans. Everyone who fights against them, they refer to them as the Crusaders, including the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Turks, the Egyptians. So all the local Muslim Sunni armies fighting against them, they say, are enemies. Of course, America, you know, Britain, Australia are also enemies. But the people they're killing are, for the most part, Sunni Iraqis and Sunni Muslims from Syria. We think of them as fighting the Shia, and they are fighting Shia. We know that they don't like Shia, but they actually don't like ordinary local Iraqi and Syrian Sunnis. They
just in general, right?
Yeah, they regard them as being lost in superstition. So that they make this excessive focus upon the idea of pure Islam and purification, to the point where they blow up mosques, ancient mosques. They also have launched many attacks of people at prayer at mosques. So it's a very extreme understanding of religion. We see that. What we don't see is the soft pitch they're making to young people about building the perfect society. Yeah,
and we would like to talk about that, but we have to go for a break, and we will talk about the IS in Malaysia, as well as the contents around it, as well as the new recruits.
Sure.
We'll be right back. Bertemu kembali, kita masih lagi bersama dengan Profesor Greg Button, iaitu pengarah antarabangsa Pusat Kajian Keganasan Global Monash University, bercakap tentang memerangi ancaman Islamic State ataupun IS. Dan kita akan meneruskan perbualan ini dengan dalam bahasa Inggeris. Alright, Professor. So sometime in November last year, I remember the Prime Minister actually said something about having, he tabled basically the white paper on Islamic militancy, and he said that we need to have like a new law for anti-terrorism. So this is, I think it's because he feels like it's imperative that we act immediately, because the numbers, it's developed rapidly. So in your research that you've done, and also in your books, you've done research for quite some time in Indonesia now, and also it's very near to Malaysia, and I feel like maybe, is it growing at the same speed, or how is it?
Yeah, this is growing very rapidly. The last time we saw something like this was in the 80s and early 90s, when so-called Mujahideen went off to Afghanistan. And that, of course, gave birth to the movement we knew as Jamaat Islamiyah, as well as Abu Sayyaf group in the Philippines and so on. But people went slowly. They didn't have the internet in those days. They couldn't even phone home. They certainly didn't have social media. Today, somebody can be radicalised in the space of a few weeks or a couple of months, be given a ticket to fly to Istanbul, a bus trip to Syria, talking with their friends on social media, talking with encrypted messaging often. It happens so fast. And basically, since the declaration of the caliphate at the end of June last year, we've seen the number of foreign fighters pretty much double. That's everywhere in the world. And we don't understand a lot of what's happening, but we do know that in Southeast Asia, it's, you know, just as in Australia, there's no exemption, that these guys know how to go after young people who are idealistic and asking questions. They befriend them, win their confidence.
Yeah, with social media, and so they are really well researched into the, you know, the human psyche and the habituals. Yeah,
they are much cleverer than Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was kind of boring, and you know, you had to be very dedicated to join, and they really filtered out those who were joining. This group takes everyone. They're very sophisticated, they're very modern, they use conventional media very, very well, very good quality videos that we've seen. But they also use social media, and they encourage all of their long tail of supporters, the sort of ragtag collection of wannabes and fanboys, to freely communicate. But behind that, we have a core of leadership who understand psychological methods of recruitment and radicalisation. Basically, it depends on building friends. Somebody expresses interest in a chat room, they start asking questions, somebody comes online, starts to build their friendship, build their trust, wins them over. And in the space of a few weeks, that young person can be turned around. We're seeing a lot of teenagers, a lot of school children now getting involved.
And this means it can happen to anyone, right? In any household.
Any household. Some of the people who have joined IS in Australia have come from non-Muslim backgrounds and have come in. For them, it's been a conversion experience as well. Many kids from good Muslim households where the parents have given them good teaching and they're in a happy home, but they've made these new friends online. Some we can see, okay, they've had an extended family with extremist ideas. We can sort of see their connections, but there are others who catch us by surprise. There was a young boy arrested in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. The only reason we knew about what was happening is one of his friends saw Facebook posts and said, I'm really worried about my friend. They called a hotline and said, please check out, I think my friend is in trouble. When police checked out within the space of 9 days, they said, oh, this is a problem. They moved in, they found 3 pipe bombs that were assembled. We think for Mother's Day, we think it was a Mother's Day fun run may have been the target. So something like the Boston Marathon bombing may have occurred in Melbourne. It was narrowly averted just because a friend spoke up and said, I'm worried. And that's what we have to encourage community to do. Look out for your friends in trouble. If they're suddenly changing their ideas, they're breaking off old friendships, forming new friendships, they're expressing angry thoughts and, wanting to fight. Please speak up, because maybe you're the only one observing this, and no one else
So these are
see
some of the signposts that says that this person has been indoctrinated probably, has been influenced by IS idealism, right?
That's right. Based on our research at Monash, we think that there are 3 areas to watch for. It's change in these 3 areas over time. So more and more extremist ideas, new friendships, breaking off old friendships and social networks, and more angry thoughts, more willingness to break the law and do something extreme. If we see those signs, it doesn't always mean that there's radicalisation, because kids have lots of problems. But those 3 things together often suggest radicalisation is occurring. And today, the Australian government has begun to train community groups, teachers, doctors, and Muslim community groups, just to watch out for these signs. So if somebody's in trouble, speak up. And we hope that we can prevent radicalisation this way, or move in early and help somebody and bring them back into healthy relations. But the old approach of relying upon police and intelligence, it's still important, but it's not going to solve the problem by itself.
Correct. And it's really worrying, because these signs are very, very organic. It's very natural. It almost seems like if I have a friend who shows signs of this, I wouldn't really be that worried. Maybe she doesn't want to be friends with me anymore, and that's it. You know what I mean? So
it's natural. I have a teenage daughter, and she goes through some days when she's less happy with her dad, and some days when she's more happy, or she's fighting with her mum.
Yes. But so I'm saying it's worrying, because it might just pass you by and you don't even notice.
It might, but it's the combination of the 3 things. So having strong religious ideas is not a problem, but if the ideas have changed very quickly, somebody's changed their thinking on matters of ideology, whether religion or not religion, but ideology very quickly, whether they've formed new friends and broken off old friendships, and it's changing quite quickly, and whether a kid who was never any trouble with police or authorities is now beginning to express angry thoughts and perhaps even be involved in small criminal acts. Those 3 things together suggest radicalisation. So, teenagers, young people go through turbulence. That's normal. Becoming more religious, that's normal. Forming new friends, that's normal. But watching that combination happening together might suggest we have something else going on that we have to be worried about.
What sort of individuals would actually be prone to this normally?
There's no standard profile. We can't sort of say this is what to look for. What we have seen around the world, and certainly this is the case in Australia, sometimes we do know that it's mostly people under the age of 30, so mostly in their 20s.
Very young.
But increasingly in their teens. We're now seeing teenagers as young as 14 get radicalised. That's a big concern. More men than women, but a quarter, a fifth are young women. In this case with Islamic State, as you would expect, mostly coming from Muslim households, but some non-Muslims also being drawn into this through friendship networks, forming a new sense of purpose. A common pattern is the zero to hero narrative, this idea that, oh, I've made a mess of my life, I don't have any friends.
So this is something that I, to redeem myself.
Well, they don't think of it passively. Somebody comes along and says, okay, you had troubles, maybe you got involved with drugs or relationships, or you made a mess of things. if you do this, if you join with us and fight for this cause,
you can.
it'll all be covered over. It'll all be forgiven,
Okay.
and that's very attractive, you know, because you kind of push the reset button on life, but it's a very dramatic way of doing it.
Yeah, and especially when they're so vulnerable. All right. So we'll talk about like the appeal to these new recruits of the movement, IS movement, but we have to take a break, and we'll be back after this. Kembali, kita masih lagi dengan Profesor Great Button bercakap mengenai memerangi ancaman Islamic State ataupun IS. Alright, Professor. So right now we've talked about the IS militant, who they are and their nature, and also how it has grown really, really fast, not just in the Middle East but also in our shores. So we want to know what the appeal is to, we've talked about, how young people under 30 finding that this is an interesting thing for them to actually join or be a part of. It feels like something big is happening, and to be a part of it, it's like, it's major. So is that the only appeal, or are there any things that are like, like perks for these people who...
Well, we need to be careful that we understand the nature of the appeal. We are inclined to judge people for making bad mistakes, but we need to sort of see it from their point of view so we can understand what's drawing them in. Now, we see execution videos, we see horrible videos of violence, we think these guys are crazy and bad, who would want to join them? But the message they're putting out there through social media and through their online magazines and through their videos is actually a very positive message. If this is Al-Qaeda 3.0, then Al-Qaeda 1.0 used to say, or still says, you can't be a good Muslim without supporting jihad.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, it's a very abstract concept. So Al-Qaeda would often try and turn a local conflict, in southern Philippines or parts of Indonesia or southern Thailand into a global conflict, and get people to join. It's worked with the Caucasus, and lots of Chechens are now fighting in Syria, for example. But what Islamic State is saying is, yes, there's jihad, but the most important thing is we're building a caliphate, we're building an Islamic state, a caliphate, and it'll be the perfect society. It will be the society in which Sharia is applied perfectly. It'll be perfect justice. We'll have perfect family life. It'll be society as it should be. So it's a utopian, romantic vision that's presented in very positive terms, and that appeals. The other thing that appeals is the sense of belonging. So, viewers may have seen the video in English that was, in Indonesian that was done late last year to appealing to Indonesians, saying, come and join with the brothers and the sisters, find purpose, find belonging, this is your religious calling. They didn't emphasize killing, they didn't emphasize violence, they talked about belonging, purpose, being accepted.
Yeah, and that's what I don't understand, having, promote that, and then you see all this aggression and, weapons and killings. Like, how do they change a person who, like new recruits, for example, and they believe in that, they want to have like a perfect state, for example, and then to move into that, being really aggressive?
Well, it's also it's a particular kind of religious fundamentalism. So they say, look, you need to find the truth, and only we have the truth. The things that your uncle was teaching you, he may be a nice guy, but he doesn't really understand. Your mum and dad, they don't really understand. You've got to leave them. You've got to make hijrah. You've got to leave home. You've got to migrate. Because the trouble with what most people are telling you about religion is they don't really understand the purity of Tawhid. Only we understand it. And once you start to join that social network and you become part of that new community, you start to internalize it. And they say, well, it's prophesied that there will be this great confrontation. The Crusaders will come and try and destroy this, and they'll use many false Muslims to destroy us. But we have to stand strong and fight to defend the Khalifa. And then you say, okay, well, we have to fight. We have no choice because they're attacking us. That's always the justification. And the ends justify the means. Now, some young people, young men particularly, are drawn to the idea of having a gun, fighting with the fighters. Okay, that's what young men, you look at the video games that kids play. But for many others, it's not the fighting, it's the belonging. It's being accepted, being esteemed. And the fighting is justified in terms of, okay, we're building the perfect society, we're God's people, we have to do what we're called to do. But to be, truth be told, it's a combination of appealing to, the youthful desire for having venture and excitement and maybe handling a gun, combined with a religious calling to be part of building this pure society, combined with a very personal desire to turn your back on a life of failure and mistakes and sins that you're embarrassed about and find redemption, but also to find acceptance and belonging. So that cocktail together, the ingredients vary according to the individual, and Islamic State's recruiters are very clever at psychology. They know, okay, you know, this person, this is their weakness, this person, this is how they're feeling, this is how I should work on them. And so it's the same basic message, but it's tailored to the individual. And for them, it's a positive experience, and they come to accept the violence as inevitable. That's something we have to do.
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere at the peak of the IS, and I think there was a headline that says that the threat is real and it's like moving real fast. So it's not just in Middle East anymore. It's everywhere in the world. And
it is everywhere, and it is coming through peer networks. We have a big problem in Australia and across Southeast Asia with drugs, particularly with amphetamines, with ice. We have problems with other kinds of substance abuse. There's also kids who, all of us experience problems with mental health. We have to watch out for the well-being of our friends in all these areas. But what we know with things like juvenile delinquency and drug use, it comes through a friendship circle. A good kid who starts to hang out with the wrong kids, who makes friends, thinks that these people are nice and they're really looking after them, can end up very quickly in a very dark place. We can sort of understand it with drug addiction. It's really the same mechanisms working now. It's a different kind of drug, a different kind of promise, but it's those friendship networks. The sad thing is it's not just accidental. It's people coming after, people asking questions, identifying them, befriending them, winning their confidence. I mean, if adults can make mistakes with things like online dating, then how can some poor kid, who's made a new friend online and who's mixed up the message with religious justification and also excitement? It's a very powerful message.
So if there's one thing that we can do to stop this from growing, what would that be?
We need to understand that the police have their job to do, intelligence has their job, so we talked about new laws. Okay, those things are necessary, but we have to look out for each other. We have to look out for our friends, literally for our brothers and sisters, for the people we love, and if we see them drifting away, just as we're concerned about their well-being when it comes to substance abuse or mental health or even sexual predation that happens to people, we see the warning signs of somebody in trouble, somebody who's sinking beneath the surface. We have to speak up so that somebody can try and help them. Otherwise, we may be the only person to see it happening, and then it's too late to help them.
Like a case study, like the case in Melbourne.
That's right. If this young 17-year-old's friend didn't see the Facebook posting, it's a big thing to phone a national hotline and say, I want to talk about my friend. Thank goodness they did, because otherwise that kid may have gone ahead with a bombing which kills them and kills others. And what a useful, a waste of life for no good purpose.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor, for being here talking about this. Itu tadi Profesor Greg Button, Pengarah Antarabangsa Pusat Kajian Keganasan Global Monash University, bercakap tentang memerangi ancaman Islamic State. Beliau juga telah memberikan ceramah di Monash University mengenai the Islamic State movement, radicalization, recruitment and the appeal. Anda telah pun bersama dengan saya Izzah Izlan dalam agenda Awani. Teruskan menonton Awani, Awani, berita sekenap durasi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.